Welcome on in, everyone, to another episode of Let's Talk Utes. Today, we're going to be picking Big 12 over-unders and giving our general thoughts on each team in the Big 12. So let's start off with the Arizona Wildcats. In 2024, they were 4-8, 2-7 in the Big 12. This year, their win total, I think, is tied for the lowest in the Big 12 at 5.5. Their title odds are plus 4,000. So Vegas doesn't, think highly of their Big 12 title chances. Landon, what do you think about the Arizona Wildcats this year?
Yeah, so I'm not as down on them as most people, but I do have them hitting the under. Just kind of going into how we came to the conclusion of these win totals. We went on the Big 12 playoff predictor and we filled out every game week by week. And I have Arizona State going, not Arizona State, Arizona going 2-10, which I don't feel great about, but it's just kind of the way that things played out. I think they play one of the tougher schedules in the Big 12. They don't get any like true teams that I feel great about predicting them to win. And so I have Arizona hitting the under decently comfortably, but I'll just get it out of the way first. The Big 12 is such a crazy league. Like, you never know.
I do have them hitting the under also. I have them winning 4 games, 2-8 in the Big 12. Probably the big losses are probably the Iowa State and probably one of the surpriser ones. Maybe I have them losing to Cincinnati at Cincinnati. I think that's a game that can go either or. So, I mean, with that being said, like they could hit that 5-win mark, which would be pretty good for them, especially with after a less productive season last year than probably most were hoping. So,
Yeah, it's hard to see the path for them being one of, the upper tier contenders in the Big 12 after losing Tedero McMillan. Even with him last year, they really were not an elite team. Brent Brennan, it's never good when you're only in year 2 and you're already on the hot seat. Obviously, he fired both the OC and the DC last year. Dino Babers was kind of, as the OC was kind of an old school guy. I knew he was cooked the moment that they were playing Kansas State, and they did one of those super slow developing handoffs right up the middle, and they lost like 5 yards on it. I knew it was cooked after that point. Yeah, I'm under as well. I think that this team, I think the coaching diff and the talent diff is kind of too much to overcome here for Arizona.
Arizona had a very similar offense, like production wise, to Utah last year. We're going to go to kind of talk about like, but their defense was nowhere near as competitive, and so it really hurt them. And they are returning a bunch of production, but like we talked about last year, that doesn't really mean much if the team's not that great. And so I think Tanner hit the points. The coaching diff is going to be big.
Okay, let's move on to Arizona State. Arizona State last year obviously won the Big 12 in their first year in the league, really picked up steam over the second half of the season. They were 11-3 overall, Big 12 champions, obviously lost to Texas, and I think it was double overtime in the college football playoff. They're, one of the favorites again this year. Big 12 title odds plus 600. I think that's tied for second best, and their win total is 8.5. What do you guys think about this Arizona State Sun Devils team this year?
Yeah, I have Arizona hitting the over here. I actually predicted Arizona State to go 11-1. They have a super manageable out of conference schedule, and just the returning production of pretty much everyone on offense and defense except Scadaboo, which is a loss for sure, but they got critical transfer Udo from Army, who had a great year last year. I just really I'm a big Kenny Dillingham fan. I like where Arizona State's headed. And it feels like to me with all this returning production, they were playing their best football at the end of the year as well. So it's not like they're a team that kind of died out. They were the best at the end of the year. They have a pretty workable schedule as well. So I see Arizona State hitting the over.
Yeah, I have them comfortably hitting the over. I'm very similar to Landon, 11-1. It's kind of hard to go against a team that has arguably the best quarterback and the best wide receiver in the conference, and Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson, just two really great football players. The production returning, like Landon brought up, is something that for the championship conference champion last year is hard to overlook also. And they do have a pretty favorable schedule. They get they hit their buys before some pretty big games or right after some games. Then the bye right before Utah is going to be a big game. And then they go Utah, Texas Tech. That's probably the hardest stretch of the schedule, but a right before that, those two games is a big plus for them. And I think Kenny Dillingham's going to get this team ready, and they're going to be hard to stop.
For sure. Yeah, like Landon mentioned, they lost Scatabo, but they got Udo from Army. I mean, they have probably the best quarterback in the Big 12 in Sam Levitt, and I think they have, honestly, like the best coach in the Big 12, Kenny Dillingham. I think he's amazing. They returned 17 starters, which for a team that already won the Big 12 last year and like also got some pretty good additions in the transfer portal, like they seem to be loaded up talent-wise. So I think they're even flying maybe a little bit under the radar because, they didn't have the flashiest offseason. Maybe people are focusing more on, the Texas Tech story, for example. But, for my money, I think Arizona State is still the best team in the conference this coming year, and so I have them hitting the over as well. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Baylor. Baylor last year was 8-5, but as we all know, they had a huge winning streak towards the end of the year. I believe they won their last 6 games, so finished off super strong. Their win total this year is 7.5, and their Big 12 title odds are plus 600, so exactly the same as Arizona State. Vegas seems to view them as, one of the favorites in the conference in that kind of upper tier. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I have Baylor actually hitting the over at 8-4 this year, even with I have them losing to Auburn and SMU in the first 2 weeks. But I do think they're able to recover from that with a fairly workable Big 12 schedule. And I do think they're going to be able to pull off that win versus Arizona State week 4. They get Arizona State at home. I think Baylor's a solid team, but I do think that at the beginning of the year at Auburn I think is going to be pretty decent. At SMU should be pretty good again. Well, SMU at home, sorry. SMU, though, should still be pretty good. I think SMU is going to win that. But after that, I see Baylor going on a bit of a nice run in the Big 12 to get to 8-4, cover, hit the over.
I have them covering also 9-3, 7-2 in conference. I mean, it's kind of similar situation with Arizona State. When you have one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12, it's hard to go against you. I really like Sora Robertson. I mean, Utah probably loses that game last year if he starts over DeQuan Finn. And so it's one of those things where it's a big plus when you have a quarterback that can do what he does. And so it's hard to vote against those. And I like Aranda a lot. He's one of the coaches that I think can really take on that pressure. I mean, last year he was probably on the hot seat all year until they really hit that big win streak like Tanner brought up, and he turned the program around with a quarterback change, and they did really well.
Yeah, really my only reservation with the over here is the schedule. The non-con is super tough. I mean, Auburn, who, is putting a lot on portal guys, brought in Jackson Arnold, obviously. That's a tough game. They get it at home. Have to play SMU as well. That's really my only reservation with the over. I feel pretty good about a Dave Aranda coach team if they have a great offense, because I think he can figure out the defense as, a one-time really elite defensive coordinator. As we know, last year, partway through the year, he took over calling plays on defense because they just were not getting the production he needed. And so, new defensive coordinator hire. I think, there's reasons for optimism for that unit as well. And so for me, I'm going over on Baylor. Okay, let's move on to the next team. Let's move on to BYU. So BYU last year went 11-2, 7-2 in Big 12 games. This year they are losing a ton of returning production. Their win total is either 6.5 or 7.5. It's kind of fluctuating quite a bit with the Jake Retzlaff news, and their Big 12 title odds are plus 2,000. They do get one of the easier schedules in the Big 12. So this is, I think, a very interesting, over-under. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I have them over at 8-4, which I hate saying that as a Utah fan, but their schedule just sets up so nicely for them, actually. I think there's a really solid chance they're 6-0 going into week 8. They had a bye previously. I think they could be 6-0, ranked relatively high. They get in after that to the harder part of their schedule, which is Utah, Iowa State, Texas Tech, TCU, all in a row. I think they go 0-4 in that stretch, but I think they recover at the end of the year with a win at Cincinnati and then a win against UCF. And so that takes them to 8-4. which would be over for either the 6.5 or 7.5, whatever that win total's at.
Yeah, the win total is kind of where my set's going to be. If it's 6.5, I have them over. 7.5, I'm under. I'm at 7 exactly. I do see them struggling a little bit in the middle of their schedule. I have a stretch where they go 1-5, which is something that I think is pretty likely for BYU. Who knows who's going to be their starting quarterback? It's either going to be a quarterback who has zero big power conference play at all from Utah State, or a quarterback who hasn't had a snap, which is going to hurt them. We all know that BYU, they do have some of the best luck in college football, like statistically. And I mean, I'd rather be lucky than good in most instances. And if I was a BYU fan, I'd say the same thing. But I think they do struggle with that harder part of their schedule, and they end up being 7-5 and being in the middle of the road in the Big 12 this year.
I've got them going over as well. I do think the key stretch for them is the beginning of the season, because if they can stack up wins in the really soft portion of their schedule, then basically everything in this latter half of the season is, kind of free for them. Like, they can just take their shot, play without consequences kind of, and, really try to win as many games as possible. I think that, they don't have a ton of returning production on defense, but Jay Hill is an excellent defensive coordinator. So I'm pretty sure that unit's still going to be good, even though they lost a lot. Offense, I think, maybe a little bit light on playmakers, but they have a few guys, LJ Martin, running back, Chase Roberts, receiver, that are pretty good. It's just, our team's going to be able to key on them, and who else is there to step up. So I'm going over as well on BYU. Okay, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bearcats. In 2024, they were 5-7. Their win total this year is 6.5. And their Big 12 title odds are 30 plus 3,500. I think that this is the most talented Cincinnati team that's been in the Big 12. I think everyone agrees with that. It's just, can they take that next step? Because they really haven't had that solid season yet in the Big 12.
For Cincinnati, I'm a little bit less on them. I have them going under. I have them at 3-9. I do think they have one of the tougher schedules, at least in the Big 12 wise. I mean, they get Utah away, they get Baylor, they get BYU, they get TCU. I mean, some pretty dang good teams. Iowa State, another team that we can talk about. And then at Nebraska coming to them. I mean, that's going to be a tough game. So I had them being 3-9. I just don't think that they're quite there yet. I mean, they return a lot defensively, and who knows if that's going to be a big help for them. And the question marks on offense is going to lead me to kind of leaving them at the under and not having the greatest year in I think year 3 of the Big 12 for them.
Yeah, I have Cincinnati at 4-8, so that is the under. I see a loss at Nebraska, loss by Nebraska, loss to Iowa State, loss to Kansas, loss to Baylor, lost to Utah, lost to TCU, lost to BYU. I just think that they play a lot of teams that are just a little bit better than them. So I think that it's not going to, I don't think they'll be able to hit that 6 or 7 win mark.
Yeah, for me, this all really depends on, whether they can create more explosive plays offensively. Last year, Brendan Sorsby, was really good kind of in the short and intermediate, but deep balls, he just could not get completions on that, sub 30% completion. They brought in some fast, speedy downfield threat receivers with Cyrus Allen, Caleb Goody, and Jeff Caldwell that, they're trying to fix that. And so to me, it really rests on the offense, but I think that with one of the tougher Big 12 schedules, I'm also going under as well for Cincinnati.
I think a big thing with Cincinnati also, they're losing 4 starters on the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be something really hard to rebuild, especially if their recruiting isn't as pristine as it needs to be, and especially in that spot. And so we'll see if that will have a big play for them. I think it's gonna really hurt the struggling offense.
Okay, let's move on to the Colorado Buffaloes. Last year, they were 9-4. Obviously, had Travis Hunter, who won the Heisman, and Shador Sanders, Deion's son. This year, their win total is only 6.5, and their title odds are plus 2,200. They start the season with a tough game hosting Georgia Tech, but the schedule outside of that isn't crazy. What do you guys think about Colorado this year?
I've got Colorado just going barely under. I've got them at 6-6. I do think outside of Travis Hunter and Shador, the team has improved and they're going to be pretty solid, especially defensively. They're going to be better. Offensive line, they're going to be better. I just think that Travis and Shador were carrying Colorado a lot. And so I see a loss to Georgia Tech. I'll just go through the notable losses. I think they lose to Georgia Tech. I think they lose to BYU, TCU, Utah, Arizona State, and Kansas State. And none of those are I wouldn't say any of those are upsets, truthfully. I think they won't be favored in those games. So I have Colorado at 6-6.
Yeah, I'm the same spot, 6-6. They do have a pretty rough schedule going in. That Georgia Tech game is going to be a fun game to watch. I'll say that, to say the least. It's funny. You're funny you bring up defensively. I think they're going to be pretty good, but they are retooling a bunch. They lose their two top defensive linemen, their linebackers, both safeties, and obviously Travis Hunter. And I think that's gonna be really hard to kind of replace. And so I think the defense is actually going to be pretty solid, but the production they do have to replace is going to be hard, and that's always a question mark. Offensively, the people they did add, it's going to be exciting to see. We saw that their offense is always pretty hit or miss. If they can protect their quarterback, they're going to do well, and you saw that last year. And I think the offensive line is going to continue to make those positive strides like they did from the previous years. And so having them at 6-6, my big losses, I actually have them losing to Georgia Tech, Houston, TCU, Utah, Arizona State, and Kansas State. So probably some of the three best teams in the Big 12 losing at the end of the season in Utah, Arizona State, and Kansas State, and just some tough games in those Texas schools at TCU and Houston. That will lead me to be them at 6-6 and 4-5 in the conference this year.
I think Colorado is such an interesting case because I do think Deion is a good coach, but he did lose the Heisman winner and Shador, who was a really, really great college quarterback. It's interesting because the things that you hear about Colorado this year is, we're going to be good on defense, we're going to run the ball, which is just not what it was the past few years, to say the least. There's always a lot of transfer portal movement at Colorado. I'm kind of worried about how it's going to gel specifically this year because, Deion hasn't been in Colorado recruiting a lot of people. He's let assistants handle that, with health issues, hopefully nothing serious. We've heard about some complications, but hopefully he's doing all right. So I also have under. I just think that pure talent-wise, they're probably around, 8-4, 7-5. I'm just not sure about, the gel and how committed Colorado is going to be to the things that they say they're going to be, running the ball, stopping the run. It just hasn't been in their DNA recently. So it's gonna be under for me as well. Okay, let's move on to the Houston Cougars. Willie Fritz year 2. Last year they were 4-8. Their win total this year is 5.5. I think tied for lowest. Big 12 title odds plus 3,500. So what do you guys think about the Houston Cougars coming into this year?
Yeah, I'm taking the over for Houston. I have them at 6-6. I like Willie Fritz as a coach. I think that they're just going to continue to kind of get better and better at Houston. And they have a pretty workable schedule as well. And so for me, I have them at 6-6.
Houston's such a hard one for me. I love Houston. It's a city I lived in for a few years, and I really, really enjoyed it there. And it's one of those schools I have a really fun time looking into. It's a team I really want to pay attention to this year, especially some of the additions they got offensively. I do have them at 6-6. So I do have them going over that over. I think they really struggle away from home this year. I have them at 5-1 at home and 1-5 away, and so it's gonna be difficult to see what they do. But I really love the additions of Connor Wakeman. I really love the additions. I can never say his last name, but Tanner. He's going to be their starting tight end. He's from, I believe he's from. one of those really nice G5 schools, and then their starting running back is also a good addition. He's from Rice, and so it's going to be a fun scene to have them go to Rice and play, and kind of have that rivalry continue to go. Like I said, I have them at 6-6. It's going to be hard to beat some of those better teams that they come into. I don't think their talent's quite there yet, but Willie Fritz is an excellent coach. I think in a few years, Houston could be a pretty good a team in the Big 12 and kind of put some of those bigger teams that are now run for their money.
This is my pick for Big 12 team that overperforms their win total. Their win total is at 5.5, but the over is juiced to minus 210, which means that Vegas really expects them to go over. They think it's very likely. I think, bringing in a really good quarterback that's a system fit, Willie Fritz year 2, who I do believe is a really good coach. They have some decent talent, like weapons as far as, the tight end they brought in that Ethan mentioned, running back, a few other wide receivers. And the defense, was kind of salty last year, honestly. They were pretty good. They upset Utah and Kansas State primarily because of how well their defense actually played. So this is actually my pick to, overperform their win total by quite a bit. I could honestly, it would not shock me if they were in the 7-5, 8-4 range, because I think there is talent there, and I think the schedule is honestly pretty easy. They got a good draw this year. Okay.
Tanner Kozol from Ball State. That's that tight end we were talking about.
Okay, let's move on to Iowa State. Obviously, Big 12 title game participant last year, got blown out by Arizona State. 11-3, best season in program history by win total. This year, their win total is 7.5, and their Big 12 title odds are plus 1,200. What do you guys think about Iowa State?
Yeah, I have Iowa State coming in just under 7.5 with 7 wins. I think they have a relatively challenging schedule they play Iowa in non-conference. They also have that crazy game in Ireland, week 0, of course. I think that Rocco Becht losing his top 2 targets is going to take a big toll on their offense. So I think offensively, they'll be a decent step back, and paired with, it's not the hardest schedule. It's a pretty mid schedule in terms of Big 12 difficulty, maybe on the easier side actually just for Big 12. But I do think that they also are going to be significantly have taken a step back from last year. So I have them at 7 wins.
Iowa State, I have them at 8-4. So what's their line was 7.5?
7.5. So that's over. Yeah,
so I do have them over. For kind of the points line and hit are right on the money. Losing both of your Jaden Knoll and Jin Higgins is going to be hard. That's see with some of the best productive wide receivers in the country, let alone the conference. And one thing I will say about Ohio State, Becht, he's clutch. I mean, 4 game-winning drives last year would have been 5 if Tech didn't have just didn't erase that game winner in the final seconds. And so it's going to be really cool to kind of see what they can do and retool in that wide receiver room. I mean, defensively, they're nothing incredible, but I think they're going to be decent. They'll probably be middle of the road in the Big 12, which I think if the offense can produce, will kind of keep them in a lot of games. 8-4. My losses probably Kansas State, Iowa. I do have them losing at Colorado. I have them losing to probably the best in the conference in Arizona State.
Yeah, Iowa State is interesting because even last year, with the 2 NFL draft picks at wide receiver, they weren't exactly the most dynamic or explosive offense. They were still kind of more traditional, almost Utah-like pro style kind of. Obviously much better than what Utah's offense was last year. But I do think that they're going to take a step back. Honestly, if I look at it, this Iowa State team that coming into this year reminds me a lot of the Oklahoma State team coming into last year. And, old viewers may remember that we all picked the under for Oklahoma State last year because even though they had, returning starters, we said it doesn't matter if they're returning if, they're not great players. And I kind of feel similarly to Iowa State, probably not as strongly. I do think Iowa State will be better than, 3-9, what Oklahoma State ended at last year. But I think that they had to pay so much to retain their players that they really couldn't replace a ton of the people who either graduated or got drafted or left in the portal. they're counting on a lot of, I think, internal development to really maintain the standard. And so I'd be pretty stunned if they, won over 10 games again. I got them going under as well. I don't think they're a bad team, but I think they're just okay this year. Okay, let's move on to the Kansas Jayhawks. Last year they were 5-7. Really slow start before they really picked up steam, and I think that they knocked off 3 ranked teams in a row at one point last year, even though they finished 5-7. Their win total this year is 7.5, so Vegas expects progression from them. And some of their key games are hosting Utah, obviously the rivalry game versus Kansas State. What do you guys think about Kansas this year?
I have Kansas at 7-5, which is just under their win total, but I'm not necessarily down on this team. Jalen Daniels back. They also lost a lot of close games, and they were playing their best football near the end of the season, which I think is something to look at because that a lot of the times can continue into the next season. I have losses to Utah, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Missouri, which I feel like all of those are pretty reasonable. Outside of that, though, they should win most of these other games. It just really comes down to if they can snag one of those and get to like 8 wins and hit their over.
Yeah, so I have them under pretty comfortably at 5-7. I think that Missouri game to start the season is going to be really rough for them, and then they go to they have 2 games right after West Virginia and Cincinnati that I think will kind of determine their season. I think honestly it's really just week 7. If they can win at Central Florida, I think they have a chance of getting it to over. I have them losing, and then they have on a pretty rough stretch in Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and then at Arizona. That's another game where that's a flop for me. I think after that Arizona game, they have Iowa State and Utah. That's going to be probably their toughest stretch of the schedule. So I do have them going 5-7 and 3-6 in conference play, only beating out West Virginia, Cincinnati, and Arizona.
Looking at this Kansas schedule, I actually really love how it sets up. I think the first 6 weeks, it wouldn't shock me if they were 6-0 or 5-1. I think it sets up that well. Like they could also be worse than that just based on, if other teams progress, but it kind of reminds me of the BYU schedule in a way that it's a really soft opening and then the close is much tougher. So I think that Kansas is pretty good. I like Lance Leipold as a coach. I think the fact that they get to play at their actual stadium again now instead of having to use different venues could really help them because, who wants to travel that far and not be able to play or practice at your own home stadium? It's just kind of weird. So I think that I'm going over for sure. I think Jalen Daniels extremely experienced. If he can stay healthy like he did last year, then yeah, I actually feel really good about Kansas. I don't mind the schedule. I like the talent. I like the coaching. What's not to like there? Let's move on to their rival in the same state, Kansas State Wildcats. Last year, they were 9-4, 5-4 in the Big 12. Their win total this year is 8.5, which I believe is the highest win total in the Big 12. And their title odds are, I think, tied for second at plus 600. Obviously, they opened week 0 versus Iowa State. Farmageddon in Ireland. It's kind of crazy almost to have that game in week 0. It makes no sense to me, but I'll be watching for sure. What do you guys think about Kansas State coming up this season?
I have Kansas State actually over, even with the 8.5. I have them going 10-2, and that schedule might reflect. I'm not quite that high on Kansas State. I like their team and I like what they have. They've been the model of consistency over the past few years, just 8 and 9 win seasons. It feels like every single year, and they have a relatively manageable schedule. Non-conference is decently easy with North Dakota, Army. It's very doable, and I think Avery Johnson, I don't know if he's ever going to take that huge next step that some Kansas State fans are hoping or that some people have been hoping. I kind of feel like he more is kind of how he is going to be. I don't see him developing a greatly improved pass game or anything, but I still think him with just cutting down on the turnovers a little bit, playing maybe a little bit more safe, I think that could get them to 10-2 this season.
Yeah, I actually have them in a very similar spot. I have them at 9-3, so I do have him hitting the over barely. Um, I think it's a little different. I have a little different viewpoint on their schedule. I think they hit some of the bigger, they hit all four of the teams I have ahead of them in the conference play. I actually no, that's a lie. They hit three out of the four. They do miss Arizona State, in Utah, Baylor, and Texas Tech. So I think their schedule is it's kind of difficult. They do have two of those at away as well. Um, my biggest question mark for them, again, it's going to be their returning offensive line. They lost a lot of them. They lost three out of their five starters. They do have a George Fitzpatrick, I believe. He's a former four-star from Ohio State that's coming. He's going to secure up a tackle spot. And then they also have a JB Nelson, Penn State. He was the number one JUCO transfer in 2022, and then he came over from Penn State, 2023. Yeah, 2022. Sorry, I said that right. So there is a little bit of question marks. Can that offensive line mesh, and can they keep Avery Johnson afloat? And how is he going to take that second year jump? That's my big question mark for them. Their defense is always pretty good. They're returning quite a bit of pretty solid production in about 63%. There's not a lot of I don't see a lot of like big people that are leaving their room, and which is good for them. But like I said before, getting at Baylor, getting at Utah, then playing Texas Tech after a big rivalry game at Kansas is going to be kind of hard to recover from. I have those as their three losses this year.
Yeah, I really like Kansas State. They upgraded with some wide receivers in the portal. I think they're going to have a lot of talent out there. Dylan Edwards at running back is special, especially when you pair him with, the run threat that Avery Johnson poses. I am a believer in Avery Johnson, but I'm also someone who last year, pushed the brakes on, the Heisman talk. I've always compared him to Dorian Thompson-Robinson at UCLA, who, was similar to Avery Johnson, not the greatest passer, but really dynamic athletically and could run. And it took him a few years of starting to really become that elite player. But once he got there, he was just awesome. I predict a similar thing for Avery Johnson. I don't think he's going to be like elite, like Heisman contender this season, but I think he's going to progress a bit from last season because honestly, I think a lot of his errors really cost them games. And I think that when they were playing good, they were right up there with, Arizona State or Iowa State or anyone else that was on top of the Big 12. They just, they lost some almost inexplicable games because of errors. Not only Avery Johnson, I don't want to put it all on him, but yeah, I mean, you shouldn't really be losing to Houston as like a Big 12 favorite based on what they were last year. This year may be different.
I mean, watch
but
that
I do have
BYU came over again. I mean, that was one of the most insane flips of all time. I mean, they were up 21-7 before like 2 minutes left.
I don't think it was that much, but it was like I just vividly remember Avery Johnson throwing an interception to a defensive lineman that was sitting on the ground. Like he was on the ground, like he was on the field, and he was laying on the field, and he caught an interception. Like I couldn't believe what I've seen.
It's just like, what are you doing?
Exactly. But yeah, I think that I'm not sure he'll ever be like an insanely high field player, but I think that mentally you can cut down on turnovers and mistakes. So I have them going over. I have them at 9-3, one of the better teams in the Big 12. Let's move on to the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who I think were probably the most disappointing Big 12 team last year. I think that was Mike Gundy's first losing season in like 15 years or some crazy stat like that. They went 3-9, didn't win a single Big 12 game, 0-9. I mean, extreme portal movement, 60-player roster overhaul. Their win total this year is 5.5, which is honestly decent respect based on kind of the talent they've brought in. What do you guys think about Oklahoma State this year?
I actually have Oklahoma State at 6-6 just because of the trust I have in Mike Gundy. A couple years ago, I didn't think their roster was very good and they made the Big 12 championship. Like, I don't see anything stopping them from winning at least 6 games this year, personally. Like, Mike Gundy has proven he doesn't need, on paper, the best roster to go win these football games. But I think I forgot what show I was watching. But I honestly thought it was a good take where it's like, if you could choose, one coach to take a roster of random guys and get as many wins as possible, Mike Gundy's really high up there on the list of guys that you would choose to get that team
For
playing
sure.
together and get some wins. So, playing at Oregon out of conference, that's a loss for sure. But UT Martin and Tulsa, pretty doable. I think that Oklahoma State's going to be able to get to 6 wins this year and hit that over.
The exact same spot, 6-6. If Utah's offense was anemic, Oklahoma State's defense was just right there with them. It was one of those things where, I mean, according to Pick Six Preview, 67th overall for the adjusted opponents, like opponents adjusted per play ranking, which is out of 68.
And that's out of 68. Yeah.
So their rush defense was the worst out of all power conference players last year, teams last year. Their pass defense was not much better at 62. And so if they can become average in that spot and their offense can kind of find a way to have a quarterback coming in, it's going to be very interesting. They're very, I mean, Landon hit it right in the head. If you got Mike Gundy, you have a chance. I'm just a little concerned about them to do any big noises here in the Big 12 this year. I think next coming years, if they can figure out the defense and the quarterbacks take the right step, next coming years, they can be kind of back where they're at the top of the Big 12, but I don't think it's this year. 6-6 is where I have them.
Yeah, I totally agree about, the Mike Gundy stuff and the roster overhaul. The thing that really concerns me is they don't have a quarterback that has thrown a college pass. And so it's literally maybe the most inexperienced QB battle ever, potentially. It'll be interesting to see what they can get from that spot. And especially, bringing in new OC, bringing in new DC. We'll see what Gundy can do. One thing that does, bring me confidence, though, is they're not going into the year like last year thinking, oh, we're a Big 12 contender, we're really good. They know they have holes. And so I feel like it's almost easier when you have holes to really patch them up than when you start tooting your own horn and thinking, oh, we're really, really good, there's nothing that's really going to hold us back. So I kind of think that self-awareness is going to help them to be better this year because they'll plan for, having difficulty. So yeah, I'm going over as well. I'm going 6-6. I think they're going to make a bowl game. I think it's going to surprise some people, but Gundy, it's weird to say, but he's almost coaching for his job here. So I think they're going to be pretty inspired. Let's move on to TCU. Last year they were 9-4. This year the win total is 6.5. They open at North Carolina playing Chapel Hill in first game. What do you guys think about TCU?
I actually have TCU at 9-3, so hitting the over there, and that is with a loss to North Carolina and a loss to SMU. I just have a feeling, I think that TCU has recruited the best out of high school last 5 years average of any team in the Big 12. And so I think that just baseline talent level really raises your floor. Pairing that with a quarterback who has experience as well as a good coach in Sonny Dykes, I just think TCU is set up to have a very solid year. People might look at them and say, wow, TCU went 9-3, that's crazy. But I think it'll kind of be almost a quiet 9-3, if that makes sense.
This is a really weird one for me. They're kind of similar to Houston. I just do not know what they're going to be like this year. I like them a lot. I do truly believe that they're a good team. I just have them losing some games that I'm like, I don't see them. It's there are a lot of toss-ups. I mean, at BYU is a tough game. At Arizona State's a tough game. At Kansas State's a tough game. North Carolina's a tough game. There's a lot of games where I'm like, that's going to be really hard to win. There's a few that I have them losing that I'm like, I think they can win. And at against Iowa State, at Houston, there's just a few that I'm just like, I just don't know. Landon hit some really great points. They have they have great experience at quarterback. Sonny Dykes is an excellent coach. I just don't know where those wins are going to come. I'm just more confident in some of those losses, unfortunately for them. So I have them at 6-6. They're over 6.5, right?
6.5, yeah. So you go under slightly.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they get 8 wins. I wouldn't be surprised if they're as productive as they were last year.
Yeah, I think the schedule really does them no favors here. It's one of those teams that you could see them like having a disappointing non-con, and then they just get into Big 12 play and it all clicks, and they like, you know, are, you know, up there very near the top, almost like Utah in like 2022. Disappointing non-con, you know, switch to Rising, and then all of a sudden, you know, take off. I could see a similar thing for TCU. Yeah. I do have them going over because I think the defense will be better. I mean, it can't really be much worse than it was last year. I mean, the offense was doing its part just fine. The defense was where it really disappointed them. I think it's going to be better. I think the big risk on offense is the entirely new receiving core that Baylor's going to need to break in after losing pretty much everybody. But Josh Hoover's a really great starting point for, you know, passing attack. And I think that the fact that he put up great numbers last year with no run game at all, basically, bodes really well for if they can be a little bit more balanced this year. So yeah, I've got TCU going over. Okay, let's talk about Texas Tech. Texas Tech obviously had the really flashy portal offseason where people were throwing around, you know, crazy numbers as far as the money they were putting in for, you know, players to rebuild their team, and, you know, more power to them. I wish Utah had that money to throw around for sure. I mean, it's what it is in college football. I think it's great for Texas Tech. They went 8-5 in 2024, and their win total this year is 8.5, tied for highest in the Big 12 with Kansas State, I believe, and they are plus 600 title odds. So what do you guys think about Texas Tech this year?
I have Texas Tech hitting the over. You never know sometimes with these portal teams. Texas Tech is a super boom or bust team, in my opinion. Like, I could see them going 11-1, 10-2, but if things just fall apart and it's like a Florida State scenario where the transfers just do not mesh, like 6-6 is not out of the question. They do have an easy non-con with Arkansas, Kent State, and Oregon State. I think they go 3-0 through that. I do think they lose their first game on the road at Utah. I think that that's going to be not necessarily a trap game, but when you play away from your stadium for the first time, it's just different each season. When you play your first road game, it just is a little bit different. So I have Texas Tech 10-2. I do like the talent they have. I just think it depends on how quickly and how well is that talent really going to mesh.
Yeah, I have Texas Tech. They are 10-2 also. I do have them hitting that over. The coordinator switches is going to be interesting. Obviously, the defensive side of the ball, switching out your coordinator for a really rough defense is usually a positive. So hopefully that kind of helps them out on that side of the ball. But offensively, I mean, they were one of the best productive offenses last year, 4th ranked in scoring, and they lose the OC. They do bring in someone that I believe is going to be pretty decent. Mac Leftwich from Texas Tech. I mean, Utah went after him before we landed on Jason Beck. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see, can he keep that offense as somewhat to similar production? The portal hits are going to be awesome. I mean, you got a lot of really great guys coming in, and it's going to be hard to see what they can do. They're one of those teams where, I mean, I think their schedule is a little bit favorable, but also not at the same time. They do take Arizona State and Utah at home, away, and Kansas State. So that's really rough, but they do have some good opportunities to make some splashes there. I think they're a really good team. I'm just intrigued to see if those the portal hits and then the change in coordinators will help them out or hopefully not hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, they literally cannot get worse on defense. Like, that's the thing. Like, their defense was so awful last year that they're going to be better. Like, I feel confident saying that. Even if they're still not good, they're going to be better on defense. It's interesting because, you know, if you just put everything down on paper for every team, like, it's either this roster or Arizona State roster that probably you would choose is the most talented, quote-unquote, roster in the Big 12. But since there is so many portal additions, you know, the entire defense is basically new. You know, the offensive line is completely rebuilt as well. So are receivers. You know, like, I think that they need to hit on what, like 75% of those transfers to like be the best team in the Big 12 probably. Like they have some margin for error just because of the amount of talent they brought in. But they've got to hit at a pretty high rate, you know, and like guys transfer like for a reason, whether that's just money or whether they're looking for a better opportunity, you know. Like if they were like dominating and were getting paid at their current spot, like they wouldn't leave. So I do think there is some risk there, but I am going over just because I think the talent is there. But this is a huge year for Joey McGuire, honestly. Like, if it doesn't come together, I think Texas Tech will be looking for a new coach next year. Okay, let's move on to UCF. UCF, of course, moved off Gus Malzahn, who went to be the OC at Florida State, I believe, hired Scott Frost again, who they won the national title with in 2017, 13-0.
Yes. I was about to say the same thing. National champion Scott Frost. Put some respect on his name.
National champ Scott Frost. Yeah. Some inflammatory comments towards Nebraska saying you can't win a national title there. They didn't take that too well, I don't think. Last year, disappointing year. I think people expected more. 4-8. Win total this year is 6-5. Is that correct? That's what I have down in my notes. But yeah, it's a pretty high win total, honestly. What do you guys think about UCF this year?
Yeah, I've got UCF at only 3 wins, unfortunately for them. Losing RJ Harvey, he was basically their whole offense. They were rushing for like 270 yards per game. They won't be able to keep that up as well. And then I think it's a transition year. You're getting your old, new head coach back. I just don't think they're going to be able to put it together this year. They don't have an easy Big 12 schedule either. Well, I don't know. It's tough in the Big 12. It's tough to know like how hard are some of these or how easy are some of these. They play Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas State, BYU. It's manageable, but I don't see a great year for UCF. They're kind of one of those teams that as you're just picking everything, some teams are just going to end up where things didn't go their way. Because I don't really think that there's a huge difference between them and a lot of these other teams. There's a ton of toss-up games, and so I've got them at 3-9.
UCF is one of those teams where I have a very limited knowledge on, and so I don't have a lot to say. I do have them hitting the under if it's at 6.5. I have them at 6 wins. I think they're going to be pretty good at home. I mean, that's kind of where it looks like, at least for the playoff predictors on my schedule. I have them winning going 6-1 at home, 0-5 away. I don't really know. I'll be honest. This is a team that I can definitely see being middle or the bottom half of the Big 12, and that's kind of where I have them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just checked on FanDuel, and the over is 5.5 right now. So I think I may have written that one down wrong. So yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, for me, I've got UCF under. I mean, the roster's entirely new. There's a potential 4-way QB battle, which to me just shows that they have no freaking idea like what they want to do. And I mean, if Alex Grinch is your DC, not sure you're going to have a good defense. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Ethan's changing his prediction now after hearing that.
0-12.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Utah fans are, intimately familiar with Alex Grinch defenses.
Why can't we play them this year? That's a free win now.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I'm going under. I do think Scott Frost is a pretty good coach. I think Nebraska just didn't work out. The pressure was too much at your alma mater, but I expect them to be good in the future, but this year, not so much.
I like UCF, man. They could be a team that they have the donors, they have the location. I think it could be really cool. I just hope it works out one, because they'd be a fun team to be really good in the Big 12.
Yeah, they for sure got a base. I think they've got some potential there. We'll see how they can, capitalize on this Big 12 entry. Okay, let's move on to the Utes. Obviously, we are a Utah football-focused podcast.
Question: do we want to switch this up and go West Virginia, then go Utah?
No.
Okay.
So we're going to start with Utah here. So Utah obviously last year went 5-7. Their win total this year is 7.5. The Big 12 title odds are, plus 550, which is tied for the favorite, or maybe plus 600 is the most accurate. Just looked on FanDuel. So they're tied for second in the Big 12 title odds. Obviously, the entire offense is pretty much new, moving on from the Cam Rising era. What do you guys think about Utah this year?
Yeah, so I have Utah going over. I'll give my final record kind of prediction at the end. A little bit of a tricky non-conference to start at UCLA, who isn't expected to be an amazing team, but they are getting some extra hype and energy from that Nico Iamaleava transfer. So that's going to be a very interesting and intriguing game. Cal Poly should be a win. Playing at Wyoming, going out to Laramie. I don't know. It's kind of a trap game. Wyoming's been known sometimes to beat these Power 4 teams, but at the same time, should be able to take care of business. Getting Texas Tech at home first week of conference play, I think is really interesting. It's probably the time that you would most like to play Texas Tech, in my opinion, before they've had more time to mesh, because that's always going to be the question with them. And then after that, Utah unfortunately does have one of the most difficult Big 12 schedules. They get Texas Tech, Arizona State, Baylor, and Kansas State, which are four of what many people would assume to be the top teams. So I have Utah going 9-3 overall, with losses to Kansas State, Baylor, and Arizona State. This is one I could definitely see Utah being able to do more than this, but you just have to see it with the offense. You have to see it. It's been years of having not just a below average offense, but a way below average offense. Seeing is believing. Like, I can't feel comfortable putting Utah higher than 9-3 without seeing the offense and these different changes first.
Man, I don't know. I am, as if you watch, you probably know, the optimistic guy of this group. It is very hard for me to look at this schedule and say, we have more than 3 losses, or we have more than 2 losses. I'm a firm believer that we're going to win, or we're going to be 10-2. I think the over-under is at 7.5 is a little crazy. I think 8.5 is a little bit more realistic, personally, but that's just me. I think we win at UCLA. I don't want to go through the whole schedule, because I could, and it's going to get too long. But the big games, Lennon said, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas State. Luckily, we get 3 out of 4 of those games at home. I do think we win 2 out of those 3, and I think the loss comes at Arizona State, and it comes to Baylor at Baylor. I think that's kind of where we're going to be there, and I think Utah's going to be 10-2, will be over. On the offense, of course, is the big question mark. Addition by subtraction, losing Andy Ludwig, getting in Jason Beck. If we can be at least average, if we were at least slightly below average last year, we're at 10 wins. And if Morgan Scalley's defense is he can be just as good or just a little bit worse, and our offense is just a little bit, is going to be the middle of the road or hopefully better. I mean, Utah has a really good shot to be in the Big 12 championship game. Probably a little bit homer bias on my side coming from me, but and I'm aware of that. But I just don't see a world where we lose more than 3 games, and I think 2 is realistic for Utah.
I think that Utah is an interesting team because there are really positions or units that have so much talent, top of the Big 12 type of talent, like offensive line or like safeties. But then there are also units that, are maybe bottom of the Big 12 type of talent, like wide receiver. So it's really interesting because how big of a difference will those elite units be able to make? Will Utah be able to, really pressure people with an elite run game with Devon Dampier and Wayshawn Parker and Naquari Rogers coming in? Or will, the offense be held back by lack of talent at the receiver position? I think it's really fascinating. The total is 7.5, but the juice is minus 170 to the over. So I think I would say Vegas is expecting 8 wins. I am going to go over as well, not as strongly as, you two. I think Utah is really good this year. I think that there are some holes like receiver, defensive tackle that teams may be able to exploit. They could maybe, a few games on the road, you make a couple mistakes, teams take advantage of that. So I'm going to go over as well. Not as strongly as you guys, but I'll go over. Okay, let's move on to West Virginia. Last year they were 6-7. This year the win total is 6.5, I believe. Let me see. It's actually 5.5. And yeah, obviously Rich Rod returning, former legendary coach there back in the day where they were really, really great. Pretty much an entire roster being rebuilt. I think they only have a few returning starters total. What do you guys think about West Virginia this year?
Yeah, I have West Virginia under. I just don't see it with replacing, your entire roster. You know, they had kind of an anomaly year a couple years ago where they had a good season, and then with a lot of the similar players, they go and follow it up with a much more disappointing season. I just don't think replacing that many pieces at the same time is going to work out well for them. I don't see them winning a ton of games this year. I've got them under.
I have them under as well. I have them not having the greatest year. That's going to be a rough one. I think it's going to be a good rebuilding year, and I think in a few years, hopefully, West Virginia can go back to some of those better years.
Yeah, I think the Rich Rod hire is a really good one. I do think that with, nobody returning, basically a brand new roster, it's not going to be in this first year. But, obviously Rich Rod was one of the people that really pioneered the up-tempo spread attack. I think that that's an interesting concept and could cause people trouble if you catch them on the wrong night or, you make a couple mistakes. I do have them under as well. Like, I think that they're good, but they're not. I think they could potentially be good in the future, but they're not there yet. So I'm going under as well for West Virginia.